All right, hey everyone. Today is Friday, October 2nd, and I'm going to go over, exactly what we did in class today. So we're going to start off with some notes, and then after that, you're going to work on your Declaration of Independence reading from meeting from yesterday. It's not expected to be finished today, okay? Priority today really is just doing these notes over the Declaration of Independence, okay? So let's go ahead and let's dive on into that, all right? All right, so the last time we talked, the colonies, British American colonies were kind of in an uproar about the passage of the Stamp Act. Trust between the colonists and the king and Parliament has really broken apart. By 1775, we're seeing actual battles fought between American militia and British soldiers in the New England area, Battle of Bunker Hill, and a few others as well. So in a lot of ways, when the Declaration of Independence is written, we're already at war for our independence. Okay, so just kind of giving you an idea of the timeline here. But it's really, this document, when it was initially written, Jefferson, Adams, Franklin, they didn't think it was going to be all that important. They were just like, hey, this is just expressing on paper the American mindset, the way we Americans think about what's going on right now. But it turned into, and it has turned into, just an incredibly important statement about the rights, the fundamental rights of human beings. Okay, so let's dive into that story. The Declaration of Independence was written by the Second Continental Congress by primarily Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, though Benjamin Franklin technically was assigned to the committee to write it. It would be signed by all of the Founding Fathers. So the Founding Fathers are the ones who signed the Declaration, including three Georgians, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. The document itself, it's basically just a letter that they sent to Great Britain saying, hey, we're done, we're over, we're breaking up, we're not going to get back together. If you want to be, cute about it, it's a breakup letter, okay? It was signed or ratified on July 4th, 1776, in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And the group that wrote it, and you need to remember this, is the Second Continental Congress. All right. So the First Continental Congress, they'd sent a kind of a peace overtures to Great Britain and the King. That had gone away. Then they formed a Second Continental Congress, this time involving delegates from all 13 of the colonies. And the reason that they were doing it was pretty straightforward. They were explaining to the king why, at this point in time, they were going to go ahead and declare their independence. So what does it look like? What is it? How is it broken down? If you look over here in the picture, it looks like just one giant block of text. And I mean, technically that is exactly what it is. But it is broken into three primary parts that you'll need to know for the test, like both what they are and what they say. And that is the preamble, the list of grievances, and the declaration. So I'm going to skip around in these slides for just a few minutes as we talk about each one of these sections individually. So the preamble, this is where Jefferson basically justifies the colonist principles for declaring independence. This is the why are we doing this? What are our fundamental beliefs that allow us to do this? And those fundamental beliefs are grounded in what is, of their time, a new concept called natural rights. And it's this idea that by being born human, you are born with certain rights that can't be taken away from you. In particular, they would say the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, they would say those are three examples of natural rights, but it's not an exhaustive list. So let's take a look at what the words in the preamble section actually look like. And I've pulled out some of my favorite quotes in this. The preamble to the Declaration of Independence has been quoted by just about every president, every leader. I mean, I believe there's even a record of Ho Chi Minh quoting from the Declaration of Independence when he was trying to like stand up a communist government in North Vietnam. It was quoted by Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Memorial for the March on Washington during the Civil Rights era. So it really has had a profound international impact. So let's look at some of these terms. I'm going to read it and then kind of pause and explain, and then we'll move on. So when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. So basically, this is a very fancy way of saying things happen and things have to change occasionally. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So this is basically saying like, hey, yeah, things have to change. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and separate, but I'm going to try to explain to you, Great Britain, King, Parliament, why we're doing this. And it goes on. It says, this is where you really get into the stuff that's very famous. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So basically that means we hold these truths that we are about to speak are obvious and should be immediately recognized by everyone. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Yes, slavery is an issue at the time this is written. Yes, the guy who's writing this is a slave owner. And yes, that guy recognizes the hypocrisy. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson was self-aware enough to realize that that there's a conflict between this statement, this famous statement, and the way that the American economy at the time was working, including his own personal finances. That being said, in a lot of ways, this is where I want to tell you that the Declaration of Independence was less a statement of current conditions, especially in the preamble, than it was in a statement of goals, like a place, it's a destination for America, not necessarily a reflection of exactly where we are in this moment in history. In fact, Jefferson himself would later write that he believes that the issue of slavery would tear the nation apart eventually, and he would turn out to be correct. In 1860, we would get the Civil War. Okay, so that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So basically, these rights, they come from our Creator, from our God in a sense, but not necessarily the Christian God, just whoever you believe is your Creator. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So basically the right to live, the right to have freedom over and control over yourself and your property, and to pursue the things that bring you joy. Okay? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So basically that means that the role of government is to protect individual liberty, individual freedom, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So basically, that government, it is a legitimate government if it gets its powers from the people it governs. That when any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. So basically, when the government becomes the threat to your liberties, it's the right of the people to throw that government off, to shed themselves of that government. And it is their right to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Basically, once a government has gone in this direction, it has to be completely reformed in a new way to protect people's liberties, safety, and happiness. All right. So that's the beginning part. That's the preamble that we've just been talking about. Next up is the list of grievances. And yes, I know this looks like a block of text. It does not look like a list. But when you read it, and we're going to look at some examples here, it really does read just like a list would. All right, so let's look at that. So literally, this is one sentence after another sentence after another sentence. They all kind of read like they start with the word for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. So basically, keeping soldiers here in our own homes. for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit in the inhabitants of these lands. So basically letting the British military and British officers get away with murder, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. So the Parliament would eventually, toward when this crisis gets really bad after Bunker Hill, would pass the prohibitory, I don't know, some 18th century prohibit word, act. And what that effectively did is it announced that Great Britain would no longer protect American merchant ships on the high seas. And that leaves them open to attack from pirates and other nations. Pirates being a thing back then. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. So basically saying, hey, you didn't ask. This is that no taxation without representation piece. And then for depriving us in many cases of the benefit by trial by jury. So some of the stuff that they would do to Massachusetts would basically deny individuals, and eventually all the colonies, deny individuals a right to a trial by their peers. Okay, so but you can see that it really does read like a list. So it's like, you did this thing on this date that made me mad. You did this other thing that is upsetting and wrong, and so on and so forth. So it gets really, really granular, really specific. And then last but not least is the confusingly named section called the Declaration. It's the part at the end where they're like, no, for real. We have these high-minded ideals that we talked about in the preamble. We have these specific reasons we don't like you in the list of grievances. Both of those combined mean that we're not getting back together. Okay? So let's look at that. And this is where you start to see some of the most radical language of the time, of this document. And says, especially coming from the perspective of somebody who's lived under, a citizen who's lived under monarchy, or a group of citizens who've lived under monarchy for generations. And it says, a prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. So basically they're calling the king a tyrant, which won't make you friends with the king. And is saying that because he's a tyrant, he's not allowed to lead. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America. I want to point something out. This is one of the first times that we see this phrase that would have become the name of our country used, and that is the United States of America. Now, notice in this case, the U is not capitalized. It's not a proper noun. That's because it's not yet the name of this nation. Instead, it's just a reflection of their condition, that all the former colonies, now states, are united in America. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, so in meeting, do declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. All right, so it goes away. This is the part of the breakup letter where it's like, no, for real, it's over. We're not getting back together. All right. Now, this is a Georgia history class, so we're going to learn about Georgia's connection to the Declaration of Independence. There were 3 signers whose last names you will need to remember for quizzes or for the test. And that is Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. Start with Button Gwinnett, because, you know, we live in Gwinnett. Oh, yeah, by the way, you'll notice that all these 3 connected counties, these are all the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. So we got Gwinnett, and then right across the Loganville line is Walton, and then up near where I live in the north side of Gwinnett is Hall County. Okay. All right, Button Gwinnett, interesting guy, bit of a hothead. He would be nominated by a group in Savannah to go to the Second Continental Congress. And he would sign the Declaration of Independence, but he would die about a year later in a duel with somebody who said he wasn't patriotic enough. So, yeah, just a bit of a hothead. Lyman Hall, this guy would go on to become, and George Walton, they would both become very influential in Georgia's state politics after the war is over. Lyman Hall is a doctor, future governor. He would help to found the University of Georgia, which we're going to learn about in the next unit. And then George Walton, he was a military leader, and he would go on to serve as a Supreme Court judge and a senator. Okay, at the end of the day, if you live in Gwinnett, you're going to learn about Button Gwinnett. Okay, so you need to remember that for the test and going forward. All right, we got a few clicker questions, or we'll call them clicker questions, but they're the questions we're going to use for the time to climb. Feel free to look those over, and then when you're done, you need to spend some time working on that reading for meaning from yesterday that you should have started after the quiz, the declaring independence, the process of writing a declaration. Really, by the end of today, you should be done with at least annotating and these 4 questions here. If you are not at that point by the end of today, you are behind. All right, that about does it. It is Friday, so I look forward to seeing everybody on Monday, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye, all.